Hi everyone, and welcome to our next video in P5. In a previous video, we looked at how we can create dynamic graphics, and we're going to take a look at some more examples of how you can do that. First one, let's take a look at this program here. We have a variable here, x. We're going to set the initial value equal to 0, and then we're going to create a canvas size of 400 by 400. Inside function draw, we're going to set the background grayscale to 200, and then we're going to use the fill command because we want to fill a rectangle with a color. In this case, we're going to use red, and then we're going to draw a rectangle. Notice here that these two last arguments here are both 100, so that means the length and width are going to be the same. In other words, it's going to be a square. This value is the y value. That is fixed at 50. But notice here we have an x value here. We've got a variable for the x portion of the coordinate. And initially that x value is 0. But notice on line 10, we're going to increase the x value by 1 every time that this loops. Remember, function draw is looping over and over again, and it does it really fast. So what's going to look like as I'm increasing the x value by 1 and it redraws it? Well, think about it and let's take a look. We're going to get a square moving across the screen horizontally because we're changing the x value. The y value is fixed, so it's not moving down. The size is fixed. What's changing is the x value. Now, what if I stop it and I'm going to change and make this y equal to 0. I'm going to change this x here to 50. I'm going to make this equal to y. And I'm going to go and change the y value. And I'm going to increase it by 1 each time so it looks like that. So take a second to think about it. What's it going to look like? This time we're fixing the x value. We're going to increase the y value. So when you run it, it looks like so. It's going to go down because we're increasing the y value. So that's what's changing. This time the x is fixed, the y is changing, so it's going down. Let's take a look at another example here of how we can get some dynamic graphics. If we take a look at this next program, it's very similar to the last one, except instead of using a square, we're going to use a circle. It's going to have a center position. In other words, it's going to be placed at 200, 200. But notice here, the third argument is the radius. We're going to set it equal to r. Well, initially, it has a radius of 1. But in line 10, we're going to increase the radius by 1 each time it runs. So what's it going to look like? Take a second to think about it. When you run it, it's going to look like this. The center is fixed at 200, 200. What's changing is the radius. It is increasing by 1 over time. If we rerun it, again, it looks like this until it goes off the screen and we can't see it changing, even though we know it actually is. It just doesn't fit on the canvas. So there, that's another way you can create some dynamic graphics. Next one. If we take a look at this one, this time we're going to use the arc command. So same idea as the last two, but this time we're going to use the arc command. And notice here, we're going to set the center of the arc to be at 200, 200. It's going to have a certain size defined by the next two arguments. But look what I'm going to do here. I'm going to change where the arc starts and where it ends. So remember, this is the initial arm. For the arc, this is the terminal arm. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase it by 1. So if x is equal to, let's say, 1, then this would have a value of 2. If x is equal to 2, then this part would have a value of 3. So that creates a start and an end point for the arc. So what's going to look like when you run it? Well, think about it. It's going to stay in the same position. It's got the same size. Where it starts and where it ends in terms of the arc is going to change. So it looks like this. Kind of looks like a spinning wheel. And hopefully it comes out on your video. You can see that it stays fixed at 200, 200. The size stays fixed. What's changing is where the arc begins and where it ends. It happens really fast, so that's why it looks like it is spinning. So there, that's another way you could do some dynamic graphics. I'm going to stop it there. And let's take a look at one more. This program has more than 2 functions. Typically, we only see, up until this point, programs that have just function setup and function drop. But this one actually has 3 more functions. It's got a function called part 1. It's got another one called part 2. And it's got another one called part 3. If we look inside each function and look at the code, all it does here is it draws a certain size circle, a certain color. Function part 2 does the same thing. The only thing that's going to change is actually the color of the circle. Function part 3, same thing again. It's the same size circle. We're just going to change the color. If we go back to function draw, let's look at what's happening here. It's going to execute this line here, which basically what it does is it says, I want you to jump down and I want you to do a function called part 1. So it jumps down here and it executes this function after a certain period of time. When it's done, it will jump down to part 2 and it will execute this function after a certain period of time. And then after that's done, it does part 3. Since function draw loops over and over, it's going to keep going and keep going and keep going and keep going. So if I press play, I'm going to get a green circle, but then you can see kind of the random colors because each function's being called, but everything is happening very quickly. So it looks like it's flashing green and flashing red and flashing blue. Maybe it looks like the colors are even mixing a little bit because it's happening so fast. So there, that's another way that you could do some dynamic graphics. We are using a new function called set timeout to basically execute these different functions here that are drawing different color circles. So that's it for this video. I suggest trying these here. You're going to have an assignment where you have to do some dynamic graphics. So take a look at these videos and